So we've seen all the big announcements of the new Tiger 1200, the 2022 model and onwards. It's a completely new bike, new frame, new engine, new everything pretty much. There's one or two things that are carried over from the old bike, and there are some snippets under the hood that weren't dead obvious when the bike was launched. So I'm just going to pick up on a few here. What about service items for a start? Well, they're pretty much the same. It's a 10,000 mile service interval, 16,000 kilometers. This Gen 3 Tiger here, they were looking for a spark plug check every 10,000 miles. If your dealer ever did that, go and get your money back. Because I don't believe most of them would have taken the tank off and all the plastics just to check the spark plugs. I told my dealer not to do it. It's just a waste of time, waste of money, and I doubt they did that. The new bike, the Gen 4, doesn't call for that spark plug check at the 10,000 mile interval. And yeah, as I say, I can't imagine any dealer ever did it. It really wasn't required. So the valve service interval on this the new bike is the same as the old bike. The only thing they've done is they've changed the fuel lines, the fuel rubber hoses and the evaporative loss hoses every 4 years. That's now no longer in the service interval of the new bike. My dealer tells me that try and quietly drop that on this bike anyway, so they don't need to be done on this bike anymore. What else? They've extended the coolant service interval, so instead of every 3 years to replace the coolant on this, it's stretched out to 4 years. So that's welcome. That's another nice thing. Otherwise, pretty much everything else stays the same. Spark plugs at 20,000 miles, air filter at 20,000 miles, valve timing and camshaft adjust at 20,000 miles. One of the big differences is I noticed on this Gen 3 Tiger, the shaft drive oil is sealed for the life of the bike. Well, you get it changed, the dealer changes it at the first service and then don't touch it again, and there's no need to. And there really isn't. Now, I bet there's a pile of owners who do change it just because they like fiddling with bikes and shit, but you don't need to. Now, on the new Gen 4 Tiger 1200, there's an oil service interval of every 2 years on this shaft drive. Now, it make you think, if they can get away with this for life, not being able to change it, what's suddenly changed in the new shaft drive? You just wonder whether it's an accepted, thing that people think needs changing, and they'll throw it in just to give the dealer something to bill. I don't know. It just seems a bit odd that they can have this sealed for life and the new ones have to be changed every 2 years. That valve service interval of 20,000 miles, 32,000 kilometers, pretty good. Unless you compare it to a Pan America, of course. Just be wary of that oil service interval there. The oil capacity dropped from 4.5 litres to 4 litres. So you have a little bit less oil there kicking around the engine. So keep on top of those oil changes. What else is the same? Well, of course, the switchgear. Now, I love this Triumph switchgear. I think it's absolutely brilliant. At night time, it's great. It's backlit. Not that I do a lot of nighttime riding, but it is nice to have the backlit switchgear. So that's retained on the new bike, but it is excellent, so worth having retained. 9 levels of damping on the new Gen 4. That's the same as the Gen 3 bike, this bike, so 9 levels of damping as well. This Triumph semi-active suspension on the Gen 3, there was nothing semi-active about it at all, really. I've gone through that in another video. In normal riding, once you set the damping level on this Gen 3, nothing changes. They give you the impression in the marketing material that the new Gen 4 does change the damping for you in normal riding mode. It's difficult to work out whether it really is active suspension or not. They're still calling it semi-active suspension, so I'd like to know exactly what the semi-active part is on the suspension on the new Gen 4, because it was definitely not semi-active on this Gen 3, not in normal everyday road use. But it'd be interesting to see if they've gone further on that on the Gen 4. Now, we've got auto preload on the new Gen 4, of course, and it's an absolute brilliant feature. It's a feature us Gen 3 owners know of as well, of course. And so, but we have this feedback, this swing on position sensor rod and swing on position sensor underneath here. That's not visible on the new bike. So if you want to lower your bike, and I have mine lowered by 20 mil, with lowering links, I needed to replace my swing on position sensor rod, otherwise I would have mucked up the geometry of the bike. I can't see that on the new bike, so lowering the new Gen 4 might be an issue. In fact, I'm pretty sure it will be an issue unless you can find out how it's compensating for the load on this bike for rear preload. So lowering kits on the Gen 4, beware, don't rush out and buy anything until you find out exactly what's happening. The rider modes look pretty much exactly the same on the Gen 4, and the way they have them laid out looks almost identical to what's on this platform. That's great actually, because they're very simple, very easy to understand, very easy to customize if you need to customize them at all. So they look almost identical to the old bike, so that's going to be an easy thing to understand. Looking through the owner's manual of the new Gen 4, a lot of the stuff under the seat looks to be similar. So I think they've used the same electronics underneath the hood for a lot of things. Like they've used the same keyless ignition system for a start. That's by a company called Plectron, I think. And it doesn't look like that's changed at all. So I think a lot of the electronics are being reused, but it's not something you really come into contact with, so it's of no consequence. Like for instance, the rear power socket, that's still electronically fused at 5 amps. And the front power socket here, that's connected directly to the battery, and that's rated fused at 10 amps with an actual fuse. On the new bike, they've moved it to about here, which might be a little bit more useful if you're powering sat navs and stuff like that. If you're using this front to power heated kit on yourself, maybe a little less useful, but I think swings and roundabouts, I don't think it's of any real consequence. If you heavily load the Gen 3 bike, what you can do, apart from the headlight adjustment, there's a separate lever, a heavy load lever behind this headlight. You can get your hand to it through here, and it dips the headlight by a couple of degrees. So if you load it up with panniers and pillion and stuff like that, you can just flip this lever. You can just get your finger in behind there and flip the lever, and it'll just dip the headlight a little bit, stop blinding oncoming cars. That doesn't seem to be there on the new bike, so that's something that's gone. Now that may mean, because the rear shock has a greater span on the preload adjustment, and it stops a little bit of the sag, so that's probably a good thing. So the only thing that's keyless on this bike is the steering lock and the ignition. On the new bike, on the Gen 4, they've made the fuel tank keyless as well. So just in case that fails for some reason, they've included a Allen key underneath the seat, so you can remove this to get in the tank as an emergency. The only thing I'll say about the wireless key system, if you have an alarm on the bike, it really makes the wireless system totally redundant, because you have to get your key out every time to switch the alarm off. So great for places where your bikes are safe and stuff like that. The keyless ignition works well. You can just saunter up to the bike and jump on and start the bike. That's great. The carrying capacity of these bikes, or the payload, has gone down. It's gone down to 222 kilos for all bikes. That's a change. Let's say the XRT, for instance, would have been 228 kilos. The XR, which was the real entry-level road model of the Gen 3s, that was 230 kilos. But I'd say only a handful of those were ever sold. So the XCA, XRT, that sort of stuff is around 227, 228 kilos. So it's lost about 5 or 6 kilos of carrying capacity on the Gen 4, which is, it's a negative, but hey, look, I'm on a challenge to lose weight, so I'll compensate for that myself. The battery's changed on this bike. It's now a much lighter lithium-ion battery. The battery technology did change on the Gen 3 for a much lighter battery from the Gen 2, but they've gone one step further again with the lithium-ion battery, which is much lighter again. So that's one of the ways they saved a bit of weight. They now have the rider's name on the welcome screen. You can program that, so that's nice. I can't wait to put rude words in there. Tyre pressures have changed on the new Gen 4 as well. They deviate from the Gen 3 and the Gen 2 and one before them. So there's new tyre pressures. I know there's new wheel sizes and everything like that, but to try and seem to deviate from the bog standard 3642 that everybody seems to recommend. So they've obviously tuned those tyre pressures to how they think work best on the bike. But something to watch out for if you're switching from the Gen 3 to the Gen 4. They are different. Another positive is the warranty has now gone from, well, in UK and Ireland anyway, I'm sure the rest of the world, the warranty has been extended from 2 years to 3 years. I think that's great. On the seat lock, made it from the back of the bike round to the side of the bike. I always thought it was a bit dorky and a bit awkward at the back of the bike, I have to say, because you were kind of unlocking the seat and then walking around the side of the bike. So, yeah, small change, but yeah, seat lock is back in a normal place where you expect it to be. The storage compartment underneath the rear seat is new. Somewhere to put your phone and stick it in the USB charger. That was kind of exposed before, and you probably wouldn't have left your phone under the seat on charge. So that's a nice addition. I gotta love Triumph marketing. When I went to the show, to the VIP experience, now I have to say they were brilliant. They were great hosts. They gave me a Triumph factory visit and tour voucher, and all I had to do, to get a free factory tour was put a deposit down on a new Gen 4 Triumph Tiger. So a bike I've never test driven, so I'll blow like, 15, 16, 17, 18, 20 grand on a new bike, but I got a factory tour out of it. I tell you, wishful thinking by Triumph marketing team, but yeah, you won't catch me with that one. A factory tour if you commit to blowing a wedge. No, not me, but I bet somebody fell for it. No, I wouldn't buy a new Gen 4 without a test drive, mainly because I have quite short legs and they might have got a bit too tall for me now. We'll see. So that's just me picking up on some of the lesser known features of the bike. I know I've criticised a few features, but I have to say I'm convinced the new bike will be a revelation when it's released. And I really look forward to my first test drive, I really do.